Welcome to Human Perspective. Today we're going to be talking about fiction and actually the origins of fictions, which is mythology. Mythology has had a great impact on many people throughout history and even today. And today we're going to be exploring that with Jeffrey Saffles, who was on a few weeks ago to talk about education, but we had him back. He's going to be telling us stories today. So welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you. I do love to tell stories. That's pretty much all I do in my
Which is
free time,
great. You're a great storyteller.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We'll see.
So tell me about the origins of mythology. Where does that come from? The origins of fiction.
Well, I mean, there's different perspectives on that. I mean, a lot of people tend to believe that mythology started off as essentially like an early form of science, where it's just like, hey, we can't explain this thing. How do we explain it? A god did it. Easiest way to go about it.
Yeah.
There's someone controlling this river, and it is not us, so it must be a higher power that is like us. So that's a lot of people's viewpoints on it. And there's some other ones there, like if you want to look at biblically, it's not exactly mythology as much as it is like the creation story. That's not like, oh, we can't explain this, versus God's like, I made this thing. And like the Bible says, they worship the creation, not the creator. Whereas people are like, oh, I can see the splendor of God in this thing, but I don't connect it to God. I think that God is the thing. And it kind of builds from there.
That's really cool. I think we all have a desire to want to explain things, and that's probably where mythology comes from. And I think that's kind of a cool lens to look at it, because it's almost a mirror in a lot of different ways, especially for human tendencies and human lessons. I think mythology does a good job of teaching those things. Whenever Jesus came, he spoke mostly in parables. And I think we need analogies sometimes to be able to grapple with higher concepts and things like that. Talk about the different kind of categories of mythology. So there's obviously Greek mythology.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every culture of all time has their own form of mythology. I'm a big fan of Greek mythology. Shout out to Rick Riordan, who wrote the Percy Jackson books, kind of modernized Greek mythology, got a lot of people into that. Greek, Roman, Norse, Sumerian, Mesopotamian are pretty close. There's honestly like Celtic mythology, which is pretty cool. England has their own like early form that is kind of tied with the Celts. There's Norse. I don't know if I mentioned that. Pretty much, yeah, like I said, every culture, like the Aborigines people from Australia, like every single culture has their own form of mythology here. And then there's an interesting sect, if we're talking about like the Bible here and everything, something called the Talmud, which is essentially a bunch of old school rabbis got together and they were writing on the teachings of the Old Testament in the Bible here. And my analogy for that is it's essentially the fan fiction of the Bible.
That's awesome.
Like the Old Testament is very much the canon. It's like, hey, this happened. And then a bunch of rabbis got together and were like, how do we expand upon this? And they started writing their own fan theories of things in the Bible that happened.
That's awesome. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah. So like I always say, take everything with the Talmud. I think the Talmud can be a very, very useful tool and have some very good lessons and teachings in it. But you have to take literally everything with a grain of salt.
Sure.
Because they will take something that is said, like stated in the Bible here. Like one of my personal favorites is the building of the Temple of Solomon, the first temple of God here that Solomon built. And it says it was created without any tools of man. And so a bunch of rabbis got together and they're like, okay, how was a massive temple created without the tools of man? I got it. God created a tiny little worm, a tiny little inchworm that went around and ate the stone and pooped it back out and cut all the stones itself.
That's insane.
That is in the Talmud. It's the story of God sent a little worm, honestly about the size of my nail to like my finger here, that would eat the stones that they would then move to build the temple here.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that each culture has kind of built their own mythology and their own way of explaining things. And a lot of times it has to do with some kind of higher power or like these mystical great things happening. It's just fascinating to hear that it's almost like human beings have this need for explaining, telling stories, and especially about like wondrous things. So you look at like, I'm pretty sure every society has some kind of mythology about the flood, or something like that. And it's some of those things you're like, okay, I wonder how much of this is actually just consistent then with something that happened in the ancient world.
Yeah, no, like you said, that's a very common one, the flood. Literally every single culture's mythology that I am aware of has a flood story to an extent. I also find interesting, like there's a bunch of connections like that, like dragons, for example. almost every culture in the world has an idea of a dragon, even though they like never interacted, things like that. I mean, sure, like they're different, like most of them are, but there's common threads throughout almost all mythology that you can see. Like strongmen stories, one of my favorites, kind of like the superhero, like the epics of the time. Like, you know, the Greeks have Heracles, the Romans call him Hercules. The Mesopotamians have Gilgamesh, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest recorded stories. The Bible has Samson and things like that. It's essentially just like, yes, they have godly like strength, but they're a man or a demigod or this, that, and the other thing. And it's just they perform feats that only technically gods should be able to perform.
Yeah, and you look at one of like the 7 ancient wonders of the world. I actually had the chance to go to Machu Picchu, or you know, the pyramids and things like that. And it's fun to let your imagination run to like try to figure out like how did they accomplish these things. Like especially the pyramids is one where you're just like, I don't think we've still figured that out. I mean,
that's why one of the leading theories is aliens. Has to be aliens.
There's no other explanation.
I am not a supporter of that theory. Let me be clear, not a supporter of that theory. But I know a lot of people who like they fully, even if they're like, I'm sketchy on like if aliens exist, but one of the greatest evidences is the pyramids. And I'm like, hey, to an extent, I think so, like a lot of what they had back then was just smarter than what we have today. Like we said, like the ancient Egyptians, man, I'll tell you what, they were far ahead of their time. Like they had early forms of glasses, like the ones who had papyrus, like an early form of paper. Like they had, quite frankly, advanced medicines for the time. And as much as embalmment today is kind of like a weird practice, like at the time with what they believed and what they were doing, it accomplished their goal there. And we see that as well, like sometimes the ancient stuff is better than what we have today. Like Greek fire was the Greeks' secret weapon. It was a fire that would burn even on water, and the only way to put it out was like to remove oxygen from it. Like it was almost impossible to stop. We don't know how to make it. We can like napalm is close, probably the closest thing we have, but it is not Greek fire. Like it is not as potent as written. That and like the roads in Rome, they're self-healing. That's how they've lasted so long, because they had a better mixture than we do today. And so like they crack, but then they're able to like self-heal somehow. I can't exactly remember how. I think it's like it makes a limestone in there or something.
That's
like
really
that.
cool. There's a logical fallacy that technology is linear, and that of course we would have come up with these things. But I think when you realize that technology and advancement is just what the human mind and creativity comes up with. And so we have cars obviously today and like planes and things like that. But what if that wasn't invented and we had figured out a different way of transportation? It could have looked completely different.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I like thinking about that because especially in an ancient world, it's like, oh, they weren't as advanced as us. And in some ways that may be true, but at the same time, it's like they probably had things that we didn't, and it puts things in perspective.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, it'd be really cool to see exactly how it went down. To be like, I know for a fact. But unfortunately, literally all of history is kind of just like speculation to an extent.
It's a big mess, yeah.
It's like everyone's just like, hey, we are experts in this field, and we're pretty sure this is how it went down. Everyone's like, okay, that's how it went down then.
Yeah.
But like, there's nothing we can know in the past with 100% certainty, even if we were there, because there's always like personal biases, like maybe you miss something going on behind you and things like that. Where it's like, like we do our best guess.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit about the story of Achilles, because I know that like that's I know he appears in the Odyssey. I know it's his thing is the Iliad, right?
Yes, yeah. Achilles technically in the Odyssey has already been killed. Like Achilles dies before the end of the Trojan War happens here. I love Achilles here just as a character, because if there's one word to describe him, it's passion. Achilles literally does not do anything without being all in on it. Like it is great. Like literally the start of the entire series of the Trojan War, one of like the greatest, most like famous mythological wars of all time, which we do believe did actually happen. Probably not all the gods intervening and things like that, but there was some historical evidence for an actual Trojan War happening. But it starts with sing, O goddess, the wrath of Achilles. Passion is his thing. He feels very deeply, very deep anger and very deep love.
It's interesting to see this because we look at Achilles and he's almost in some ways personified as this really manly figure. And when we look at him, one of the things we see is passion, but I think we also see empathy.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention just empathy, but also deep love. And I think especially in modern masculinity, those are things that have almost been like we feel like we can't have those things. It's like it's hard to today to feel like you're a man and feel empathetic, be sensitive, have deep love, especially for other men.
Achilles cried profusely when Patroclus was dead. Like he was the most dramatic he's ever been. He is considered the greatest Greek hero of all time. Like, and it's just, hey, the greatest Greek hero of all time loved and had such a passion so profound that he almost broke the will of the fates. Like, and you're telling me that's not a man? Really?
I could be a strong-headed man, want to conquer the world, and still feel these emotions. Like, we've in a lot of ways removed emotions from modern masculinity, and it's just that's a big piece of it. You know, I think even in the Bible it talks about like the famous verse, Jesus wept. So I think that's just really interesting. Obviously, you are very passionate about storytelling, and I think one of the things is whenever you go back and you look at stories told beforehand, we have in some ways just lost, I think, a lot of the art of storytelling. You go to the movie theaters today and it's so much, I don't know, there's something missing. What do we think we're missing in the modern world as far as storytelling goes?
Tales of old, it was not for profit, I guess is a decent way of putting it. Like most of the tales of old, it was just a fun story to tell around people. It's like, oh, hey, like gather around. Let me tell you the story about fairies and unicorns and dragons and kings and gods and this, that, and the other thing. And it was very much just for like human entertainment. It was about the story, not about what the story can get you. I think is a very distinct thing there, which is just like, yes, this is going to be a fun story that everyone can enjoy versus how can we make the story make us money?
And I think it's like, yes, there's the degree of entertainment, but also, like I said, communicating these major things. Like you said about like, I think it's kind of funny because as you're listing those things, you kind of got more grand. And I think the last thing was like, and of gods, you know, and it's like, I think there's no coincidence that each culture, like you were talking about, has some kind of mythos, like to want to explain. I think there's something deeply woven within each human being that wants to seek the greater. And it's like we are worshipers whether we want it to be or not, like because you're worshiping something else or you're worshiping yourself. Like you have to have some kind of object of your attention, and I think that's an intentional design, and I think it's so rich and full, and I can't really put my finger on it, but you know it when you feel it, you know. And so I think in today's day and age, you see like I think Dune was probably one of those movies where I was like, man, this feels like just a good story. And it wasn't because, yes, it was entertaining, but it almost touched on something deeper. And I think like that's something that I always really want to explore, of like the deeper narratives and the deeper almost spirit behind storytelling.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I do need to go back and correct what I was saying because, yeah, like it was for entertainment, but like you said, it was also like to teach a lesson. There are very few stories that were told just because they were stories. Most of them had like a moral lesson behind it. Like a big one in Greek mythology is one of the big law of Zeus is to be kind to strangers. And there's a lot of stories of Zeus and Hermes disguising as mortals and like testing the law of hospitality is what it's called, and testing people's hospitality to see how they treat their fellow man. And like all the stories that were told were moral lessons to be like, hey, treat everyone with kindness because you never know if someone's going to turn out to be a god and smite you if you don't.
One of the most beautiful things about storytelling is that they capture the human spirit. And I think the human spirit is something that it's hard to put your finger on, right? And so whenever we talk about things that are spiritual, we have to use analogies. We have to use stories. We have to use like just all those kind of things. Like you always have to put it in a container. And so I think that, to me, those are when the best stories are told. I put you on Vinland Saga, and the whole thing to me was like, this is not just a story, but this is talking about deep growth and development within a human being, and the stages of what that looks like. And so that's why I really attach to that, because you're able to now not only see yourself in the character, but you're also able to see yourself in the process. And so I think that's one thing that I love about storytelling is it gives you these frameworks to see your own life through. Like I was just talking to my mom, and she is kind of at a transition point in her career, and it reminded me of in the Odyssey with Odysseus. He's pretty close to getting home, and he's on some island with like a womanly figure, and she's kind of like wanting him to stay and be comfortable. And it was kind of cool because I was able to see in her journey how there's these like kind of lures of, hey, like you can give out and this would be easy right now, but it's like usually at the last 10% there's something where it's like, oh, hey, like this is enticing, like give in. And then, but if you stick with it, then you might actually see it through to the end. That's a trope in a story, but people have seen that all like time and time again in their life. And if you're reading that story, it gives you the ability to see that and have the strength to push through, to be like, hey, I might actually almost get home instead of just staying on this island.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I saw this post here recently and I was like, whatever, it's dumb. but it was good to an extent. I can't remember the exact thing, but it was like commitment is giving up temporary gain for what you actually want. Which is kind of what you're talking about here. Like Odysseus was very committed to getting home. He was at war in Troy for 10 years, and then it took him another 10 years to get back home. I believe you're talking about him on the island with Calypso, where I believe he stayed there for 7 years, actually, which was not to lack of him wanting to leave. It was that he was not able to leave. And Calypso very much kept him here. But then Hermes came and was like, hey, you can leave if you want to. And Calypso's island was like a paradise. It's essentially like a Garden of Eden. You have a beautiful goddess there who loves you and wants to give you everything she has. And Odysseus is like, hey, I have a wife and son at home. I got to get back to them. And then he leaves this, what probably would have been comfortable other than the fact that he was like, I miss my wife and kids, and I have terrible, terrible PTSD from watching all of my comrades die before me.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. And he sails off on it was a perilous journey with his whole crew, a perilous journey alone on a raft. To get back home.
More often than not, I see a lack of human spirit just in storytelling now. And I think that's a big issue, and I think it points to a bigger issue in our culture. However, I think looking back at older stories, a few things that come to mind and I've mentioned this before, but in Les Mis, the story of Jean Valjean. Like, I think when I think about human spirit, at least for me, I think it is always about the story of development of the soul. And so you look at a character like Jean Valjean or Thorfinn, from Vinland Saga, they don't stay in the same place. And I think so often now we see these characters that like really don't evolve or change, so they like, you see the Marvel movies nowadays, it's like all of the characters stay pretty consistent throughout all of the movies, even though there was a lot of them and a lot of things happen. And I love the idea that it's like, you can't walk through the same river twice because it's not the same river and it's not the same man. We are always changing. And I think people are uncomfortable with that. But I think the truth is like, you should be changing for the better. And that is a good thing. But I think we're just numbed a lot of the time. And I don't think we're put into situations where we can see proper character development. And I think that's the point of living, in my opinion. It's like, if you're not living to become a better person, to refine your soul, to see more beauty in the world and to see more beauty in the others around you, like, what are we doing? I don't know. Like, I mean, to me, that's the nectar of life.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I was like, my brain is going to Batman right now.
Oh, Batman.
Because if you look at Batman, I mean, like, yeah, plot armor is his greatest ability.
Sure.
But also it's
prep time.
Prep time. You can't beat him with prep time. But it's very much the thing of like, he's surrounded by some of the most powerful beings in existence. Like you have, like you said, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern holding the most powerful weapon in the universe, be able to create constructs out of light. Aquaman, the King of Atlantis. The Flash, who is essentially like a god of speed. And Flash is untouchable anyways. And then there's Batman, who's just like, I have dead parents, trauma, and a bunch of money. I'm going to fight you all.
I love the voice. That was really good.
I'm Batman. Yeah, which is very much like you're saying, like it's the question of like the indomitable human spirit, which is like you have all these beings that are superhuman. They're greater than humans are, but it's just the human will to stand up and say, I can make my own mark here.
It's interesting that you say that because when you were listing that, my mind actually went back to my favorite superhero, which is Spider-Man. And I think he's a lot of people's favorite superhero. And I think why is because he's kind of the people's hero of like, Tony Stark is in his like ivory tower and is like, just talking with Jarvis. Like, you have Thor who's like going back to Asgard and like hanging out with goddesses and gods. And then you just have Spider-Man who's like just trying to pay his rent. You know what I'm saying?
I'm so broke. Like there's that one famous panel of Iron Man being like, we have money. And Spider-Man just goes, oh, thank God. And hugs Tony Stark because he's like, I need money, please.
But I think it's so like in my opinion, he's the most inspiring hero because like not only is he fighting battles for the greater good, but he's always in fighting his own personal battles at the same time. And a lot of times sacrificing his own good for other people. Like for Tony Stark, he has it all. And in some ways he wants to go out and save people because he's kind of bored, you know what I'm saying? And because he's like, oh, what else am I gonna do? I have all this money and intellect, I can't, like, there's nothing else to conquer. But him, it's like Spider-Man's behind on rent. He is trying to take care of Aunt May. He's trying to keep his relationship together, and a lot of times he's looking for a job. A lot of times he doesn't, he's bouncing from job to job.
He's like, oh, no.
But he still chooses to be Spider-Man, and it's not because it gives him anything, but because he chooses to be a hero.
I have to disagree with you on that one point because I don't think he chooses to be Spider-Man. I think he has to choose not to be Spider-Man. Like every time he chooses to not be Spider-Man, he always comes back to it. And like you said, it's always at the detriment to his own health and his own personal life. He's like, okay, like I'm running late for school. I got to get there. This is the final time. Oh, someone's being mugged. I can't not intervene. Like this is who I am as a person. Like we see that even before he got the spider powers. Like he was a nerdy kid who got picked on. And part of the reason why was he like made himself a deliberate target to prevent other nerdy kids from getting picked on. Like Peter Parker is just an intrinsically good person, at least to me. That's how I see him. Like I don't think he is able to not help other people.
And he's so true to his own convictions, right?
Yeah.
Because it would be so easy for him to falter one time, but he can't live with himself if he didn't. And I think he knows what the good thing to do is, and he knows he has the power to change it. And I think that's one big message I keep consistently through this podcast is like, you have the power to change things for the positive, and I encourage people to do so. And Spider-Man is just such a good representation of that. Tell me a little bit about the hero archetype, right? Because I think that's something that we see very consistently throughout fiction.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple different hero archetypes, to be honest with you, that we see throughout. But if you want to look at like essentially the noble hero one here, that's your Peter Parkers, that's your Clark Kents. Even though, like you said, Superman and Spider-Man are exactly on the same level because Superman's just so far ahead and above, but it's just like Clark Kent and Peter Parker, honestly, more than their superhero alter egos, are the noble hero archetype, because it's very much that intrinsic thing of like, hey, even if I don't have the power to stop something, I have the responsibility to at least try. Like Spider-Man's motto, you can't save everyone, but you can at least try. And it's just very much that, like, they are the ones who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Like, even if something is not their fault, it's very much something I think that we aspire to see today, because so many people avoid responsibility and blame. Like, oh, that wasn't me, that's on you, or that wasn't me, that was this, that, and the other thing. Whereas, like, these hero types are like, even if it fully was not on them, they still take the blame. They're like, no, I could have done something better to stop it. Just very much the intrinsic thing of, I can do better, I will do better, I will not let this happen again, because I have a responsibility to do this thing.
I want to highlight that because I know people who in my personal life who are like that, and I would say to those people, like, you are a hero. Like, even if you don't feel like one, in the modern society, that is what a hero looks like. And I think obviously we look at, you know, the masks and the superpowers and the stopping the train, but we don't have that ability. But we do have is the ability to just help the people around us. And so if you're somebody who I feel like feels seen in this conversation of what the things we're talking about right now, I want to encourage you, like, you are a hero. And if you're not, then I think you look at that and ask yourself how you can do that better. Because I think that's important. If you are helping people around you, like, to not to self-aggrandize or, you know, do anything like that, but to just know that, like, hey, you're making a difference and it's important. You know, I think that's what holds the fabric of society together.
Like, you don't need to have super strength or superpowers to be a hero, and you don't need to save the world. You can just save one person, which I believe that is actually an old famous quote. I can't remember who said it, but it says, whoever saves one person saves the world. And it's just very much the idea of, like, hey, just help your neighbor. Like, if you want to get a little biblical with it, it's just like, Jesus Christ is the greatest hero of all time because he saved the world. But it is funny because, like, you don't see Jesus Christ, the Son of God, stopping a runaway train or defeating a raging monster in a massive city or anything like that. But still, he is considered a hero. Why? He washed the foot of his neighbor. He healed a sick man. He talked to the lonely and the broken. And he is considered the greatest hero of all time. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's something that any of us can do.
That changes the definition of what a hero is, which I think is very interesting. Of, like, a hero is not just somebody with a cape, but it's just somebody who just seeks the good of others and is willing to put others people's needs in front of their own. And changing that definition makes it far more achievable, because, like, I don't need to be swinging through cities to do that.
Don't get me wrong, it would be cool.
Oh, I completely agree. I have that fantasy at least once a day. There's a Gandalf quote. You're gonna love this. I don't think it's in the book, but it's in the movie of The Hobbit, and it's whenever Gandalf is asked why he picked Bilbo. Here's the quote. So, some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. It is the small everyday deeds of the ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. small acts of kindness and love. Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps because I'm afraid and he gives me courage. And to me, that just hit because it's like I have felt so insignificant in my life at times where I see these huge issues and I see all this bad stuff happening and I don't feel like I can do anything about it. And like when he said that, I literally almost kind of started to tear up because it was like, no, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And as long as I can keep doing that, maybe I can encourage other people to do that.
It's even more fun when you remember that Gandalf is technically part of the Aenar, which is like the gods that sung the world into being. Gandalf is like technically like an angel who was sent to Earth in like human form here to restrict his own power. So it's essentially an angel being like, yeah, this random dude I met, he gives me hope that there's still good in the world and like to fight this great evil, which is just like, oh, that's even crazy because you see Gandalf is this powerful wizard and Bilbo's just like, I live in Bag End and I like to drink beer and smoke my fig weed or whatever it is.
Just his little pipe. Yeah.
His little pipe, yeah. And then there's Gandalf, who's just like, yeah, that's my guy.
You were talking about the relationship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's really funny because when we were talking about like fairy tales, this and the other thing, and just the stories of back then and our modern world, it's hard to not bring up Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia and all of their other books here. But I love just that C.S. Lewis is considered this great Christian author and Tolkien is considered this great fantasy writer. And it's like Tolkien is actually the one who got C.S. Lewis to become a Christian in the first place. And it's making me think as we were talking about like what are stories missing today, like what did they have back then? And I think it is just that connection there because C.S. Lewis, that's how Tolkien was able to kind of reel him in because they both worked at the same college here and they kind of became buddies. And Lewis loved fairy tales. Like you can see that in his writing, and literally he talks about them all the time. He's like, "I love fairy tales." Like,
who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. And Tolkien essentially came to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like the tales that you love so much. Like imagine if they were true." And C.S. Lewis is like, "Yeah, that would be awesome, but they're not true. That's why they're called fairy tales." And Tolkien was like, "What if I was able to show you one that is true and is real and will make your life significantly better?" And Lewis is like, all right, yeah, if you can convince me. And then they had like conversation after conversation, meeting after meeting, and eventually Tolkien was able to convince him that the Bible is the greatest fairy tale of all time, except it's not a fairy tale, it is the truth. And C.S. Lewis is like, mind blown.
Well, I think that's one of the cool things about mythos or just myths in general is that we want them to be true to some extent because it's so cool to imagine. I mean, for example, we go back to the pyramids. It's like, it's so cool to imagine it could have been aliens. You're like, what would that have looked like? You know what I'm saying? And the truth is we don't really know. And one thing that I even like imagining, which is probably also terrifying, but is the Great Flood. Like if oh man, what must have that look like? And the another one in the story of Job, the ending of it is literally God just showing him how great he is. It every time kind of floors me because he's saying like, who's shut in the ocean with stone doors, like who marked the reach of tides on those new shores, what I'm saying? It's like he's the one who made the ocean, and so like it's almost so great and it's almost terrifying. And another great example of that is the Leviathan and the Behemoth. Because you know a lot probably more about these creatures than I do.
Well, to say a lot, like there's not a whole lot around them there. Like in the Bible, they're mentioned in Job and they're mentioned in a couple of Psalms, and that's about it. But then, like I was saying, the Talmud, the fan fiction, it really goes off and wild with the Leviathan and the Behemoth. And also, of course, there's the apocryphal books. Now, the apocryphal books are kind of like a glossary to an extent. They're like secondary books to the Bible. They're not considered canon for multiple reasons, whether it is they don't know like a confirmed author or they don't have the full text or like it does not seem to fit in with all the, because like the Bible doesn't contradict itself. It's like, so it might be this or that or the other thing, but it's like they're still very good reads. So it's like the Bible, the Apocrypha, and then the Talmud over here as well as the fan fiction. But the first book of Enoch is the one that really gets into a bunch of like the mythos here with like angelology, demonology, the Nephilim, and the Leviathan and Behemoth. But yeah, the Leviathan and Behemoth, to me, it always made me think of the Pokemon the big lava dragon guy
Sure,
and
I
the
know
big
what
whale
you're talking about,
guy.
yeah.
I'm always like, oh yeah, Leviathan and Behemoth, as the Leviathan is essentially this massive like sea dragon essentially, and that's what God tells Job. He's like, who can hook the Leviathan and reel him in? It's like, who can wrestle the Behemoth to the ground, who shakes the mountains and causes the earth to erupt, as they're essentially just like masters of their own. Like there's no greater creature in the sea than the Leviathan. There's no greater beast on land than the Behemoth. And what's interesting is in one of the Psalms where they're mentioned, there's something called in Hebrew it's called ziz, which translates to like beasts of the air or something. Now, that does seem to be like plural, talking about all the birds of the sky or like this, that, and the other thing. But in the Talmud, they take it as like, okay, we have a sea monster, we have a ground monster, we got to have a sky monster.
Sure,
and so
yeah,
they
it's
take
just
Ziz,
equals that,
and
yeah.
it's essentially like the air dragon here. So you have the Leviathan that rules over the seas, the Behemoth that rules over the land, the Ziz that rules over the sky, and of course God that rules over it all. As the only being capable to reel in these three is God himself. And that's why when he comes to Job and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, can you do any of these things? No? Well, then maybe shut up a little bit, huh?
It's interesting because when we talk about these things, I love the grand sense of wonder. I love the grand sense of just these things that can exist that are so much greater than us. And then I think we take that to our normal environment and we just don't experience that anymore, I don't think. Like one of the biggest tragedies, actually I probably shouldn't say this, there's a lot of them. One of the things that I'm really sad about in the modern era is that the fact that we have a lot of light pollution. We can't see a lot of these stars. Because I remember I was in Colorado one time and I went to someplace way out of the way. And I saw so many stars, and I like looking up on it. I was just like, oh my goodness. Like it was it just inspired so much awe. That's the best way that I can put it. And when we live in our corporate sterilized routines nowadays, there's not a lot of room for it. And it's kind of tragic because there's deeply human emotion that we're missing.
Yeah, no, the world is an amazing place. And I think that might be a part of it is a lot of these stories of old, it's very much humans' connection with nature here and how like they interact. Like there's wonder in literally everything to be seen. And that's when I said like they worship the creation, not the creator, which like, yeah, that's not great. Like you like, oh, this tree is amazing. This tree must be a god. It's like, no, a god made that tree. But it like you said, like the stars are gorgeous. Like when you're able to get away from the light pollution, see that. But even like if you just take the time to get out in nature and sit down, like I have a farm. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's great. You can see the stars, everything like that. But it's just nice because there's not much noise. Like sit out there, you can hear every little thing going on. You hear the birds chirping. You hear the bugs in the grass, the crickets, the nice soft breeze. There's a little creek that runs through it. You just hear the rushing of water. And you just look around, and it is the most peaceful experience I think I've ever had. Just sitting out there and just taking it all in, just the majesty of it all. Of like, I can't explain to you how any of this stuff works, but I know it does work, and that fascinates me. And it is gorgeous just to be even just near it.
I think there's something to be said for looking at just the smallest thing and trying to find wonder in it. Like, I mean, even looking at as much of like a tree or a blade of grass or a bird that's flying above you. I mean, it's just, those are the things I think we take for granted. And unfortunately, I think we live in society that is increasingly less around nature. There's one thing I was realizing recently where I like was inside and it was, yes, climate controlled. And I remember I was like kind of cold. And then I remember going outside and it was like, not just the fresh air, but it was also just the fact that I was like, instead of just hearing silence or like my air conditioner, like I heard birds and like bugs and like just life around me. And that's something that's so taken out of the sterilized environments that we often live our entire lives in. And I think it's a deeply profound part of the human experience. And I think that's also kind of something that feeds our soul. I can't really explain why, but the sense of awe, the sense of wonder, it's just, you need it. And I can't explain why. And it's mysterious and it's far greater than us and it's greater than our what we can comprehend, but it's essential. And I think we see that through all the myths. I think we see that through all the stories. It's just incredible.
I agree. It makes me think of, the kid from The Incredibles who every time Mr. Incredible's like, well, what are you doing here? He's like, I don't know, waiting for something amazing to happen, I guess. Like, I feel like that's so many people today. It's like we're waiting for something amazing to happen to see the wonder in the world, where it's like, no, no, no. You want to see the wonder of the world? Like we talked about last time, the small things. I think the greatest amount of happiness, the greatest amount of wonder, the greatest amount of fulfillment can be found in the smallest of things. And that's why they go so unnoticed today, as everything is bigger, louder. Look at me, look at me, look at me. It's not the one beautiful little dragonfly that is
It's all stimulation and no meaning.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
and I think that's the issue is, and the tagline for this podcast, I think it's "The world feels empty. Let's search for meaning." And a big part of that is just because stimulation does not equal meaning. And I think stimulation is things that are designed in your brain to give you reward systems and keep you alive. And they've been almost weaponized against us to the point where we're always needing stimulation. We're always needing to feel something. However, I think whenever you actually feel something real, it's not stimulation, it's meaning. And that's a really important distinction of whenever you're walking throughout nature and you feel that sense of peace, it's because there's meaning in nature. There's symbolism in nature. There's something connecting you to life. Wherever it's different than staring at your phone screen that gives you stimulation but no meaning. And it's just, that's a huge divide we have. And I want to try to get back to a place of just meaning. Like, stimulation's cheap and it's boring whenever it breaks it down, because it's like chewing gum versus eating a meal, you know?
No, that's a really good analogy. It's very much, it's a treatment, it's not the cure. If you want to take like modern medicine into play, it's like they're very much like, hey, we will treat this disease because there's more money in that than just fixing the problem and curing it. And it's very much, like if we keep their minds distracted, keep them constantly stimulated, if we don't let them think and get bored long enough to think for themselves, they'll be easier to control this and the other thing. And they will believe that their meaning is in what we tell them it is. It's in the simulation. It's in this stupid little brick here.
Actually threw his phone.
I hate
That's
that
not
thing.
a prop.
But yeah, it's like you said. I totally agree with what you said. It's not about simulation. It's about finding meaning. Like, I'm not very stimulated when I go for a walk through the woods, but I feel way better than I do when I'm sitting at home stimulated, doom scrolling all night. It's like, nope, throw the phone away, go out, take a walk. Like, it will do wonders, I promise you. It's like the silly thing of like, oh, go touch some grass. No, go touch some grass. When was the last time you frolicked? Let me tell you something. Frolicking through a field of flowers, one of the greatest experiences a human can have. And not enough people do it.
I love that. That's awesome. The first time that you were on, I asked you a question of where do you think history moved whenever it was in the right direction? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it since, and it's still a really, really great question. And the thing that I don't know why my mind went here, but it made me think of the Berlin airlift, of all things. It happened during the Cold War, after the Iron Curtain was put up. There's East and West Berlin and Germany. And America was essentially like sending supplies over to East Berlin to make sure people didn't starve, make sure they had water, electricity, blankets, things like that, because they were not being taken care of by the communists. And I was like, oh, like that's a good thing that happened. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, is something truly good if it's done for the wrong reason? Which is like the classic question of like, if a bad person does a good thing, does that make it good? And if a good person does a bad thing, does that make it bad or does that make it good? Because the Berlin airlift was very much done under the guise of like, oh, look at how like charitable America is and this and the other thing. But it was very much a propaganda stunt of like, let's go stun on these communists and show them just the logistical stratagem of what capitalism can do. Because we were flying planes 24/7. As soon as a plane took off, another plane would land. As soon as that plane would take off, like it was nonstop. Sending in supplies and things like that. And like, yeah, like it was for the better because people were being helped. But I don't know if that was the actual goal as much as it was to just embarrass like someone else, where it's like, to where it's just like, did that move history in the right direction, or did that just reinforce what we've seen before of it's a pissing contest?
One of the deeper questions underneath that is, is doing something good for the wrong reasons still good?
Yes. Yeah.
And this is something that I've personally struggled with a lot. A lot. Like I can't tell you how much this is something that, because my original like coming to faith was like, oh, is it just because I don't want to burn in hell, like, or is it because I actually want to have a relationship with God? And the reality of being a human being, and this is biblical, of you will almost never understand or fully know your desires. And I remember even I was talking to somebody, and I remember like they were not maybe the most popular person, and I was in a social environment, and I remember thinking in the back of my head, like, I'm a really good person because I'm talking to this person, I'm showing them attention. And immediately as I was doing it, I was like, oh, I'm actually a horrible person because I just had that thought, and I'm now making this about me. And I get so lost in that same question of, it is a good thing if my desires are not pure. And I don't think as a human being, your desires will ever be 100% pure. And so I think that's human nature, unfortunately. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I agree with you. That is a constant struggle of a question for me as well. But I saw something recently that kind of like snapped me out of that to an extent. Like there's still in the back of my mind that question, but it's given me a satisfactory answer for the time being. And it actually had to do with Mr. Beast, of all people. You know, Mr. Beast, this massive YouTuber. And there's the one video where he was like, I cured 100 people's blindness. And it was very much just like, oh, like he's doing that for views. Like he's taking advantage of these people. And someone just shared the opinion that really stuck with me. It's like, who cares? People got helped. And I was like, I don't know why, but it just kind of like sent me back into myself for a moment. And I was like, yeah, it's like, hey, like morality and everything aside, as long as a good act is being done that helps other people, who cares what the reasoning is behind it? People were helped. It's like, I don't care if you're feeding a homeless man because you want people to look at you and be like, oh, he's a good person. Hey, that homeless man got fed at least. Like, regardless, a positive outcome did come from this. So that's kind of been my mindset recently. Like, of course, doing good things for good reasons is the ideal, but it comes down to, like, as long as you're doing good things, who cares what the reason is? Keep doing it. Like, I'd rather you do good things for a bad reason than someone who doesn't do anything.
And the truth is you're human, so be kind to yourself. It's something that I'm trying to remind myself a lot more recently. Like, I don't need to hyper analyze everything that I'm doing to make sure I'm a good person. Like, I'm actually not a good person. None of us are. Doesn't mean I can't do good things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we try to survive in a world that is devoid of meaning and of good stories and of good character, I encourage just our listeners and just everybody to take a look at the world around you, take a look at the good stories throughout history, and try to reconnect with that meaning. Stimulation's stupid, cheap, and boring. Go look for meaning.